have had feelings for Nathaniel since I was young. The whole of Springfield laughs at my infatuation, but I don't care. Later, I forced him into a business marriage with me. Since then, he has always been very cold to me. Later, I found out that he hated me because I broke him apart from the one he truly loved, Isabella. But for the previous 9 lifetimes, he kept telling me I was his most beloved person. He even promised me that he would be with me for all eternity. Eleanor, can you donate your cornea to Isabella? I will take care of you for life, guaranteeing you a worry-free life in the future. But Isabella is a photographer. If she loses her sight, she will be unable to continue living. Nathaniel spoke in a calm tone, as if what I was giving Isabella was just an ordinary accessory, and not a precious cornea. I stared at him for a while, then slowly said, "Is this what you want?" Nathaniel was momentarily stunned. Perhaps he didn't expect that I wouldn't argue with him like before. Or maybe he was surprised that I was still considering his feelings at such a time. He paused for a moment, then he nodded. I forced a smile. I said softly, "All right, Nathaniel, as you wish. This is the 10th lifetime for Nathaniel and me. As long as we can grow old together in this life, we can return to the heavenly realm together and become celestial lovers. 1,000 years ago, I was a goddess in the heavenly realm. He was a wick on the altar. He was nourished by my spiritual energy and transformed into a human. He became a celestial attendant. I named him Kai. From that day on, Kai accompanied me for 100 years in a war between immortals and demons. Kai was severely injured while protecting me. He nearly lost his soul. I used all my celestial power. He has preserved a thread of his soul and sent him to reincarnate in the human realm. As long as he goes through 10 reincarnations, he will be able to successfully overcome the tribulation and ascend to become a deity. I requested the heavenly emperor to let me descend to the mortal world as well, to ensure his smooth passage through the tribulation. But this does not comply with heavenly regulations, so the heavenly emperor and I made a bet. He agreed to let me descend, but I must relinquish my divine powers. He also said, if either of us changes our heart, the other will have their celestial roots severed, and their soul will scatter. Yu Lao is my best friend. He feels there are too many temptations in the mortal world, and is worried that Kai might change his heart. So he helped me tie the red thread. I originally didn't believe in these things. I thought that even without the red thread, Kai and I could always be together for 10 lifetimes, but I didn't want to disappoint Yu Lao's good intentions, so I kept the red thread with me. Unexpectedly, as time passed, it reached the 10th lifetime. The red string has actually loosened. In this lifetime, Kai has fallen in love with someone else, without the influence of the red string. It turns out that changing one's heart is so simple. I looked down at my wrist. The red mark that was once bright like cinnabar, now it feels like it has been lightly scratched by a nail. It has faded significantly. Only a faint trace remains. Nathaniel frowned at me. It seemed like he had something to say, but he didn't say it out loud. He looked a bit embarrassed. He said somewhat awkwardly, "Didn't you say before that you wanted to go to the snow mountain? I'll take you there once I'm done with this busy period." I listened. My heart ached suddenly. I forced a smile. Then I at least need to be able to see it. Nathaniel was momentarily speechless. He was silent for quite a while. Then he sighed. "Isabella has a unique eye structure. We have looked for over 100 people. Only your eyes meet the surgical requirements. I'm sorry. I really have no other way. That's all I have to say." He seemed to have made up his mind. He said firmly, "From now on, I will be your eyes. I promise. Once this matter is settled, I will always be by your side. Although Nathaniel doesn't love me, he will fulfill the promises he made to me." I'm thinking, if my eyes could ensure he no longer contacts Isabella, if there were no Isabella between us, could we still grow old together? Do we still have a chance to return to heaven together? I nodded and said, "Okay, I promise you." Nathaniel excitedly hugged me tightly. His embrace was warm enough to make me a little dazed. It seems like he has returned to me. Nathaniel is always like this. Clearly, he doesn't have me in his heart, yet he gives me hope, not letting me completely give up. Isabella and I both set our eyes on a sapphire bracelet at the auction. He would unhesitatingly take a photo and send it to Isabella, but later, he would personally find someone to customize a more expensive and luxurious gift for me. He always speaks to me coldly, but every Valentine's Day, he always gives me gifts. Our marriage was originally a business arrangement, as long as it looks good on the surface. That's enough. He really doesn't need to go this far. Sometimes I wonder, Did I choose the wrong person? This indifferent Nathaniel always hurts me. He is not Kai at all. Sometimes he shows me a smile through that face that looks exactly like mine. I seem to see that Kai who is willing to give everything for me, gently calling me immortal lord. Nathaniel once said when he was drunk, he also doesn't understand. Clearly, he loves Isabella, but when he sees me looking dejected, he inexplicably feels a pang of sadness. So every time he gets close to me, he never refuses. He is both pulling me in. It is also hurting me. He doesn't want me to leave. But it hasn't made me comfortable either. The lights in the operating room are blinding my eyes. I'm lying on the cold operating table. I hear the crisp sound of metal tools clashing. At the moment the anesthetic enters my bloodstream, Nathaniel's face suddenly appears in front of me. Actually, that was Kai's face. I seem to have returned to 1,000 years ago. He shielded me from the demon lord's fatal blow, covered in blood, yet still smiling gently at me. Immortal lord, don't be afraid. His blood-stained fingers gently wipe away my tears. I will always protect you. As the anesthetic takes effect, memories shatter like bubbles. Before my vision falls into darkness, I hear myself whispering, Kai, this time it's my turn to protect you. When I open my eyes again, the world before me is left with only blurry light and shadows. Nathaniel indeed has a celestial root. Even without eyes, one can still sense the surrounding situation. His voice came from the left. It sounded somewhat anxious. Wasn't it just local anesthesia? How could she have been unconscious for 3 days? Nathaniel, this is just a normal rejection response. The doctor's voice gradually became indistinct. I reached out my hand, groping to grab the bedsheet. My fingertips touched the rough surface of the bandage. My eyes felt nothing after losing my sight. Even the sense of pain seemed to have dulled. You're awake. Nathaniel suddenly held my hand. His palm was very warm. Do you want some water? I quickly withdrew my hand. I accidentally knocked over the glass on the table. The cup fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. He stood there in a daze. After a long while, he finally spoke. Isabella's surgery went smoothly. I adjusted my mood a bit. He nodded in agreement. I'm sorry. Suddenly, it became invisible. I feel a bit unaccustomed. I can feel it. When Nathaniel heard this, his body suddenly stiffened. He appeared somewhat flustered. I fumbled to get out of bed. As a result, I missed my step, switching from seeing with my eyes to sensing with my spirit. I'm still not quite used to it. Everything around me is still blurry. Nathaniel quickly reached out and hugged me. I leaned against his solid chest. It has been a long time since I was this close to him. Listening to that familiar heartbeat, I surprisingly felt a sense of reassurance. Just then, Isabella's sweet voice came through. Isabella's voice sounded very anxious. It also carried a hint of trembling. Nathaniel, where are you? Why can't I still see clearly? I'm really scared, I noticed. Isabella's eyes are clearly very clear. She obviously saw Nathaniel supporting me. That's why she pretended to say that. Isabella groped forward with her hands. There was a chair in front of her. She was about to trip over it. Nathaniel frowned. He couldn't care less about me. He immediately let go and stood up. He was too anxious. He kicked the chair away. It made a loud crash. He quickly pulled Isabella into his arms to protect her. Didn't we agree to wait for me in the ward? Why are you running around everywhere? What if you fall? He scolded her, while speaking with great concern. He gently patted Isabella's back and comforted her. Don't worry. I will protect you. I won't let you get hurt. The doctor said it's normal for your vision to be blurry temporarily. You need to rest for another 2 or 3 days. I haven't seen Nathaniel this gentle in a long time. The last time was in a past life. He was lying on the hospital bed. He was already too old, yet he still gently wiped away my tears. He said, "Don't be afraid, in the next life we'll still be husband and wife." The nurse suddenly shouted, "Eleanor, you're bleeding." I felt a sharp pain in my knee. Just now, Nathaniel suddenly let go. I couldn't steady myself. I knelt directly on the shards of glass. The blood quickly stained the glass shards red. Despite my blurry vision, I could still see the large patch of bright red beneath my legs. Nathaniel wanted to come over to help me, but Isabella held onto him tightly. She softly said, "Nathaniel, don't go." He hesitated for a moment, but still decided to hold Isabella's hand. Before leaving, he glanced at me. "Speak. I'll take Isabella back to her room first. I'll call the doctor to treat your wound later." After speaking, I heard the sound of clothes rustling, and Isabella's surprised exclamation. It turned out Nathaniel was carrying Isabella in his arms. He walked out with large strides. The nurse wanted to comfort me, but didn't know what to say. She hesitantly asked me, "Alina, are you okay?" I waved my hand, my face was pale. I forced a smile. "Don't worry. I'm fine. Just a bit of blood. Honestly, it doesn't hurt at all. This little pain is nothing compared to the suffering in my heart." The scene in front of me became increasingly blurry. Big tears fell uncontrollably. They splashed onto the back of my hand. Nathaniel returned to the ward holding Isabella. He gently placed her on the bed. He said softly, "Wait for me here. I'll be back soon." Isabella tightly held Nathaniel's hand. She pleaded, "Nathaniel, don't go, stay with me, okay?" Nathaniel frowned. He appeared somewhat displeased. "Alina is still my wife in name. It's indeed inappropriate for me to ignore her like this." As soon as Isabella heard this, tears immediately streamed down her face. She said with a sob, "I'm sorry, Nathaniel. I shouldn't have made a scene. I know I shouldn't be here." Nathaniel saw Isabella crying. His heart tightened. He quickly comforted her. "Don't cry. Your eyes just recovered. What if you hurt them again? I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. I'll stay here with you." Isabella leaned against Nathaniel's chest. Slowly moving closer to his lips, I stood at the door. I could hear their breathing growing heavier. The two of them were tightly embraced together. I could guess what was happening inside without looking. I bit my lip tightly. My nails dug into my palm, leaving marks. I desperately held back my tears. Not a sound escaped my lips. The red marks on my wrist were almost invisible now. Nathaniel deceived me. He won't grow old with me. I completed the discharge procedures in advance. With the nurse's assistance, I packed my belongings. Nathaniel stood aside. He seemed to have something to say, but couldn't find the words. He saw me carrying my luggage, ready to leave. He grabbed my wrist tightly. "Why are you in such a hurry? Why don't you stay for 2 more days, to observe the situation?" I hadn't even had a chance to speak. Isabella rushed in anxiously. "Nathaniel, so you were here with Alina. I've been looking for you for a long time." Her newly replaced corneas are dazzlingly bright. It feels like they have absorbed all the light from my eyes. Isabella is staring at my dull eyes. Her eyes are filled with unabashed sarcasm and self-satisfaction. "Alina, why did you get discharged today? If I had known, I would have come to help you pack. I understand the feeling of being unseen. It must be inconvenient to do anything. This time, my sister is willing to give me her corneas. Nathaniel and I are very grateful to you." Isabella is saying words of thanks, but there is not a hint of gratitude or apology on her face. She deliberately leans closer to Nathaniel. She wants to kiss him. Nathaniel immediately dodges away. Frowning, he warns her with his eyes, implying that someone else is watching. Isabella smiles. She takes out her phone and types a message for Nathaniel to see. It seems he is trying to prove that statement. He deliberately waves his phone in front of me. The screen displays, "What are you afraid of? She cannot see. She is blind." I have completely adapted to sensing the environment with my spiritual body. I can see clearly what is happening, but I didn't tell them. When Isabella kissed Nathaniel again, Nathaniel did not refuse, but he quickly ended the kiss. "Nathaniel, the photography club informed that a rare aurora will appear over the snow mountain tonight," Isabella said softly, as she leaned closer to Nathaniel. Her little finger accidentally brushed against his hand. "You promised before to be my exclusive model." Nathaniel hesitated a bit. He looked at me. "I already have plans for this week." Isabella noticed Nathaniel's hesitation. Suddenly, she turned to me and said, "Take Alina along," she said with a sweet voice, with a hint of coldness. I heard Alina particularly likes the snow mountain. As she bent down, I caught a whiff of the cedar perfume she was wearing. That was a gift from Nathaniel. This was supposed to be a gift for my and Nathaniel's 3rd wedding anniversary, before Nathaniel could say no again. I smiled and spoke up first. "Sure, then let's go together." After getting on the helicopter, Nathaniel took the pilot's seat. I sat in the middle. Isabella chose the window seat for better photo opportunities. Once the helicopter flew steadily, Nathaniel switched the flying mode to automatic. The closer we got to the snow-capped mountains, the colder the weather became. He noticed my legs were trembling, so he unbuttoned his suit jacket and draped it over my knees. He even skillfully tucked the edges under my legs. In my 7th life, my legs were unwell. In winter, he always took care of me like this. This made me momentarily dazed. Isabella came over with her camera. She insisted on me helping her. Nathaniel, help me take a look at this shot." She shoved the camera into his hands. Suddenly, she fell over with a gasp. Isabella has one hand pressed against mine. She wears a sapphire bracelet on her slender, fair wrist. That was at the auction. Nathaniel took a picture of it and gave it to her right in front of me. At that moment, the gemstone pressed right against the back of my hand. She intentionally rubbed hard against the back of my hand. It drew a line of blood. I felt pain. I frowned. I pushed her away. Although I didn't use much force, she slammed into the window. The movement was too abrupt. Even the plane jolted a bit. Isabella covered her head and screamed. In pain, she curled up and couldn't move. Nathaniel saw this. He immediately raised his voice, dissatisfied. He said, "Eleanor, are you being too calculative? Isabella was just showing me a photo. Why did you push her?" Isabella said with a choked voice. "Eleanor, I'm sorry. I just wanted to show Nathaniel the photo. No other intention. Don't be angry." Nathaniel said angrily, "Why are you apologizing to her? It was clearly her jealousy that pushed you." Isabella's tactics are really not clever, but Nathaniel chooses to turn a blind eye, unwilling to distinguish right from wrong. I pressed down on my bleeding hand. He said calmly, "Nathaniel, in your heart, am I really the kind of woman who disregards everyone's safety for the sake of winning affection?" Nathaniel furrowed his brow in confusion. I saw it with my own eyes. Can it still be fake? I didn't argue anymore. My gaze remained fixed ahead. The sky gradually darkened, but the white snow-capped mountains seemed to glow, clearly coming into view. "Look!" Isabella shouted excitedly. "It's the aurora." He picked up the camera. "Open the window without hesitation. Lean out and start taking pictures." The helicopter just flew through an unstable air current. Nathaniel quickly grabbed her and shouted, "Isabella, it's too dangerous. Come back quickly." Just at the moment the fuselage suddenly tilted, Isabella screamed. The camera in her hand flew out and hit the control panel. Nathaniel immediately held onto the control panel's handle, steady the direction of the plane. At the same time, he loudly reminded us to put on our oxygen masks. "Nathaniel," Isabella panicked and hid in his arms. "Tell me, I'm so scared." Nathaniel tightly held Isabella. He embraced her, while I was pushed to the side. Because the turbulence was too severe, my body slammed heavily against the cabin door. The door was knocked a bit loose. Nathaniel's face showed an unusual hint of panic. He reached out to try to grab me, but he was tightly held by Isabella. At this moment, due to the bumps, the oxygen masks dropped down, but there were only two. Isabella quickly grabbed one and put it on her face. Nathaniel held Isabella with one arm. With the other hand, he struggled to control the console. He shouted loudly, "Eleanor, quickly put on the oxygen mask." I fumbled to unbuckle the seatbelt. I grabbed the oxygen mask, but I put it on Nathaniel's face instead. Nathaniel seemed to sense that something was off with me. He shouted loudly, "Eleanor, what are you trying to do?" I looked at him. His eyes were no longer confused. It seemed he suddenly became alert. I looked calm on the outside. In fact, I even had a smile. I continued to speak. "The eighth life. You sacrificed an arm to save me." He severed one of his own arms. "In the heavy snowfall, you carried me out of danger with just one hand. In the end, he passed away due to excessive blood loss." I smiled and gently touched his arm and hand. "Say it. This time let me choose." "Perch." Upon hearing this word, Nathaniel suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if someone had struck him heavily with a hammer. He stared at my face. The scene before him overlapped with many faces. Sometimes it was an up-doe. Sometimes it was braided into twists. Sometimes wearing ancient clothing. Sometimes switching to a kipao from the Republic of China. His head hurt as if it were about to split open. Nathaniel's eyes widened. His face was filled with surprise. His lips trembled slightly. He asked, Who exactly are you?" The plane was shaking more violently in the turbulence. I felt like I was about to be thrown out. Nathaniel quickly grabbed my wrist. Just then, Isabella also screamed in panic. He quickly grabbed her wrist and pulled her into his arms. This chaotic scene reminded me of when we were in front of the Moon Elder Hall, the moment we stood by the 3 live stone together. He said back then, "Holding hands means we haven't let each other down." But now, he can hold hands with 2 people at the same time. Even the heart is split in 2. Nathaniel shouted towards the control panel, "Return to base." At that moment, Isabella suddenly pointed out the window and shouted, "We can't go back. Look over there, in the blizzard." A crack opened in the clouds. A ghostly green light coiled in the sky like a dying dragon. It's stunningly beautiful. Isabella grabbed her camera. Half of her body leaned out of the window. She pressed the shutter frantically. She shouted excitedly, "This time I will definitely win an award." Nathaniel wanted to pull her back. She suddenly turned around. She hugged him tightly. She kissed the corner of his mouth. Thank you for taking me to see the aurora. Nathaniel, I love you. Nathaniel was momentarily stunned. He didn't push her away immediately. At the same time, he unconsciously let go of my hand. At that moment, the red string on my wrist emitted its last faint glow. Then, I heard the sound of bones breaking. Every bone in my body felt like it was being driven in with nails, causing excruciating pain. I was in so much pain that I couldn't move. I had lost all my strength. My body swayed unsteadily. I was about to fall. The cabin door next to me was blown open by the airflow. I slowly fell backward. Nathaniel saw this scene. His eyes widened in shock. He pushed Isabella away. He tried to catch me, but it was already too late. His suit draped over me was blown away by the wind. It floated in the air. I feel as if I have returned to hundreds of years ago. The 6th generation. Kai is the general stationed at the border. I accompanied him to the border. The border is often plagued by wind and snow all year round. He fastened the cloak for me. I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional. His fingertips always gently brushed against my earlobe, making my face hot and flushed. He returned victorious from battle. He took me to the mountain top to see the stars, but we encountered a cloudy day. I comforted him and said, "It's okay if we can't see them today. We still have tomorrow. After all, we will always be together. One day we will be able to see them," but I didn't tell him. Actually, it's not necessary to look. The starry sky here is exactly the same as the Milky Way above. Thousands of years ago, we had admired the starry sky together many times. When the 10th cycle is completed, we can return to enjoy the starry night again. Later, he blocked the poisoned arrow for me on the snow mountain. With his last ounce of strength, he said to me, "Wait for the world to be at peace. I'll take you to see the real galaxy. The world is at peace now. I have also seen the galaxy with my own eyes, but there is no longer a resting place by my side." I fell from the helicopter. I saw Nathaniel silently forming words with his lips. For eternity, we will never have to meet again. I closed my eyes. I shed my last tear for him. The tear floated upwards as it fell. It gently landed between Nathaniel's eyebrows. The blizzard was so fierce it felt like it would tear my skin apart. I felt as if all the bones in my body were being crushed. In the severe cold of -40 degrees, my blood seemed to have frozen into ice. In a daze, the scene looked like red wax dripping from a celebratory candle. At that moment, I vaguely saw Kai walking towards me through the snowstorm. Why? I struggled to move my frozen lips. I whispered to him. He is still wearing the blood-soaked clothes from the battle between the Celestial and the demons. His blood-stained hand gently caressed my face. His eyes were filled with heartache and disbelief. It seems he cannot accept that he has hurt me so deeply. Kai gently lifted me from the snow. Many memories fell like stars. I saw our 9 reincarnations. In the first life, he was a scholar on his way to take the imperial exam. In a broken temple, he warmed my hands in the 3rd life. He was a battlefield doctor. In the 9th life, he held my injured form and wept bitterly. We were neighbors across the street. He pretended to take out the trash every day, secretly watching my balcony as my vision gradually blurred. As the last goddess in this world, ultimately, I was unable to complete this calamity perfectly in the 10th life. The tears of the goddess unlocked the seal of memory. Millennia of visions surged into Nathaniel's heart like a tide. Nathaniel watched me fall. He cried out that title in pain. Celestial Lord. He desperately reached out to grab. His body was on the verge of losing balance, but he only caught a handful of cold, empty air. The figure of the person he loved deeply quickly vanished before his eyes. It merged into the boundless snowy mountains. At this moment, he had a severe headache. His mind felt like it was being washed away by the tide. Countless images kept surfacing. He recalled 1,000 years ago. He was just a candle wick. Under the nourishment of the goddess's aura, he gradually transformed into an immortal attendant. They spent 100 years together. During their time in the heavenly realm, every smile, every moment spent gazing at the starry river together, was vividly imprinted in his memory. In that battle between immortals and demons, he was seriously injured. He almost lost his soul. To save him, the goddess exhausted all her celestial power, just to preserve a fragment of his soul, and send him to the human realm for reincarnation. Scenes from past lives flashed through his mind. He saw the moments of their encounters, understanding and companionship in each life, those gentle memories and love that he had once forgotten. At this moment, they overwhelmed him like surging waves. He also remembered this life. Every time he hurt me, I could see the pain and disappointment in his eyes when I looked at him, yet I was blinded by what was called love, carelessly hurting my true feelings. He understood many looks and emotions he had not grasped before. He also realized why he felt inexplicably heartbroken for me. Nathaniel painfully clutched his head. He finally realized he had never truly loved Isabella. Isabella was merely an illusion he had when he lost himself in a complicated world. His feelings for Isabella, in comparison to the goddess's thousand-year entanglement, seemed so insignificant. No, Nathaniel let out a desperate cry. The sound echoed in the snowy mountains, but no one responded. The plane is under Nathaniel's control. It lands with difficulty in a safe area near the snowy mountains. Isabella is still crying in fear. Nathaniel doesn't even look at her. He quickly jumps out of the plane. He rushes into the snow without hesitation, shouting my name loudly. "Leaner, where are you? I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please come back," he shouts desperately. The sound slowly fades away in the vast snowy mountains, but only the cold wind responds to him. Nathaniel searches frantically in the snow. He doesn't overlook any possible place. His hands keep digging in the snow. Blood flows from his cracked wounds, mixing with the white snow, but he feels no pain at all. His eyes are filled with despair and regret, past indifference and hurt. Now all have become the sharpest thorns in his heart. Time passes little by little. The snow falls heavier and heavier, gradually covered his figure. He hadn't eaten or drunk anything for 3 days. He kept digging in the snow. When the rescue team arrived, Nathaniel's gaze had become vacant. He couldn't hear anything anyone said. He just mechanically continued digging in the snow. When the rescue team put him on the medical vehicle, they discovered that his eyes had become severely snowblind. He couldn't see anything at all. After Nathaniel was brought back to Springfield by the rescue team, he looked as if he had lost his soul. Every day he would only ask one question: did Alina find him? Snow blindness is not an incurable disease, but he stubbornly refused any treatment. He spent all day huddled in a corner of the villa, his fingers constantly touching the suit jacket brought back from the mountain. It still had ice crystals on it. He often said things that were hard to understand. Sometimes he mentioned the general's wife. Other times he talked about the liaison officer. But the word he mentioned most often was immortal lord. The doctor diagnosed him with traumatic amnesia. He may have mistaken the plots of TV shows for his own experiences. However, only Nathaniel knows the truth in his heart. These are not fictional. Instead, they are the millennia they experience together. Whenever he wakes up in the middle of the night, confused memories stab at him like knives. Isabella has visited a few times. She brought new works from the International Photography Exhibition, but found Nathaniel's room filled with Alina's wooden sculptures. Among these wooden sculptures, the women either hold swords or caress the piano. All are dressed in ancient clothing. Nathaniel's fingers are covered in scars. Each sculpture is stained with his blood. 2 weeks later, the rescue team found Alina's body. Among her personal belongings, they found a report. The report states, her cornea was not transplanted to Isabella. Nathaniel took the report to find the surgeon. After some persuasion, the doctor admitted he was bribed by Isabella. In fact, Isabella's eyes were perfectly fine. She only experienced temporary blindness due to the pressure from not being selected in a photography competition. She had already recovered. Just then, a buyer was willing to pay a high price for corneas. She seized this opportunity and sold Alina's corneas. Nathaniel clenched the report tightly. He anxiously wondered, when did Alina learn about this? Was it before the surgery or after the surgery? She agreed to donate her corneas to win him back, but he was being affectionate with Isabella right in front of her after her surgery. Nathaniel's gaze was as cold as ice. I understand now. Thank you for telling me this. He turned to his assistant and said, get rid of it. Get rid of it. The doctor was terrified. His face changed dramatically. Quickly kneel down and beg for mercy. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. Miss Isabella made me do it. After Nathaniel left, a fire suddenly broke out in the private hospital. Subsequent investigations found that only one doctor tragically lost their life. 3 months later, the photographer Isabella, famous for capturing the aurora atop snowy peaks, accidentally fell off a cliff. The cause of her death was regrettable. She fell off a cliff. Her eyes were blinded by branches. Her legs were also broken. She crawled for hundreds of meters with her injured body, but she was unable to get rescued. She ultimately passed away a week later from hunger. Nathaniel spent $200 million on Alina's funeral. At the funeral, He stared blankly at the portrait. Not a single tear was shed. The search and rescue team found Alina's body in the snowy mountains, but he never wanted to believe it. He spent a fortune to live stream Alina's funeral worldwide. The purpose was to let everyone see Alina's appearance. I hope to find some clues from this. However, the result was that he found nothing. Nathaniel could never accept this. The goddess simply disappeared. He began to pray to the deities. He sought help from various masters to perform rituals. He just wanted to know if she still existed in this world. He reviewed the household registration information of all newborns on the day Alina passed away. He was even crazy enough to not spare information about animals born that day. In the end, Nathaniel knelt in front of the temple for 3 days. He exchanged his blindness for a piece of divine insight. She is still in the world, but she is no longer your goddess. It was like he had grasped a lifeline. He searched desperately everywhere. He hired the most professional team. As long as there was a hint about Alina, he would fly over without hesitation. Even if every expectation ended in disappointment, he would still come back. Though he understood, what he might find could just be a stranger. They might even treat him coldly, but he could not give up. He longs to see her once more while he is still alive. Only by finding her can he confront his own mistakes. His heart can find a bit of peace. Days pass by. Nathaniel still hasn't found her. In just 1 short year, his health continues to decline. His once straight posture has become hunched. His hair is gradually turning gray, but he has never given up. His team is gradually growing. The search area is expanding more and more. Finally, in a chance encounter, he identified a female college student from the neighboring city of Springfield. Her name is Sophia. That was at the peak of the snowy mountains when the goddess fell. From the thick white snow, a wisp of lingering soul floated out, carried by the wind and snow into the sky. The 3-leaved stone before the Moon Elder's Hall suddenly cracked open a seam. Red light seeped out like blood tears. The Moon Elder sighed. Put away that obsession with your sleeve. The Emperor's wager. I've still left you a glimmer of hope. The sunlight woke me up. My eyes still couldn't handle such bright light. It took a while for me to fully open them. I looked around. This place isn't as luxurious as the villa I used to live in. The furniture arrangement feels very cozy. There's a small yard outside the window. It's planted with a sweet osmanthus tree. It's now grown lush and leafy. Before I could react, a sudden loud noise interrupted my thoughts. Sophia's mom looked at me. Her tears kept falling. Various fruits were scattered on the ground. She cried and asked, "Sophia, you finally woke up. Do you remember who I am?" I frowned. Fragmented memories felt like they were being forcibly stuffed into my mind. I opened my mouth. My voice was hoarse and dry. Mom. At this moment, Sophia's dad hurriedly pushed the door open. He was only wearing 1 shoe. I stared at him. "Speak slowly." Dad, this voice just called out. The 2 of them were so excited that they cried at the same time, one after another. They walked out the door, calling family to share the good news. I looked up at the television. The news was being broadcast. It has been over a year since I had the accident in the snow-capped mountains. I struggled to sit up. I slowly walked to the mirror. The girl in the mirror looked almost exactly like my former self. She just looked younger, her lips slightly curled up, as if she had grown up in a loving environment. I reached out. My fingers gently touched the corners of my eyes. It was smooth and even there, as if it had never been injured. The body after rebirth is young and strong. My parents are both ordinary high school teachers. The home is warm and harmonious. This girl named Sophia. Her real name is Sophia. She is still in college. She had an accident while traveling during the holidays. She left this world. The day she passed away was exactly when I fell off the snow mountain. So a part of my soul was placed into her body, and her body became a vegetable. However, this is not a coincidence, because I saw that person in the chaos. Yu Lao told me, this is the only hope in the heavenly emperor's bet. Although my celestial roots are damaged, I regained life in the mortal realm, but the cost was losing my emotions, forgetting all about the past. Although it might take a long time to recultivate my celestial roots, fortunately, I did not completely disappear. Before becoming nothingness, there was still hope. Yu Lao told me in the chaos, as time passes, I will slowly forget everything from my past life, eventually becoming an ordinary person. There are no more divine maidens in the world. Now, only Sophia is alive. Nathaniel set off immediately upon hearing the news. He went to the neighboring city. He wandered outside the university for a full 3 months. He wore a black trench coat, standing under the sycamore tree. His face looked delicate but very pale. His eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of gray. He wore special brownish-gray contact lenses. Before him were only blurred shadows of light. The assistant suggested he undergo a corneal transplant, but Nathaniel shook his head firmly. He said, "This is the price I promised to the divine." These eyes should not see anything anymore, although his vision was blurred. When Sophia passed by him, he immediately recognized, she is Alina, the one who repeatedly appears in his dreams at night. Nathaniel often waited along the path Sophia frequently took. Every Wednesday afternoon, she would walk past the school's tree-lined path, holding a pile of books. Sometimes she would stop to play with the chubby cat in the school. This was the closest they had ever been, only 3.5 meters apart. Her little gestures were very similar to Alina's. This almost made Nathaniel lose control. He wanted to rush over and hug her tightly, but he never had the courage. He couldn't even bring himself to say hello, classmate. His fingers gently touched the wooden carving in his pocket. It was Alina, carved from memory. Each cut was made deeply. Wood shavings and bloodstains stuck to his palm. It was as if this would forever engrave her image in his heart. Nathaniel became the largest investor in the school. Meanwhile, Sophia received many research opportunities. She participated in activities with her mentor. She met quite a few high society individuals. She accumulated a lot of connections. After graduation, she smoothly entered a big company she admired. However, Nathaniel's condition began to worsen. His body grew increasingly weak, the doctor told him, due to the aftereffects left by the snow mountain, along with years of hard work and stress. His heart and lung function had seriously declined. It is already a miracle that he has lived this long. Upon hearing this news, he was not surprised, nor did he feel sad. He began to use all his connections to arrange a future for Sophia, ensuring that after his death, she could still live a safe and worry-free life. Another autumn has come around. I am about to graduate. Sophia's mom often says that ever since I woke up from that accident, I have become quite different. The lively and active girl from before now often stares blankly at the sky. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just that sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and suddenly feel a wave of panic in my heart. There is always a vague figure in my dreams, but whenever I try to see clearly, that person disappears into the wind and snow. It might be a side effect of the car accident. I rubbed my temples and pushed those fragmented images out of my mind. I chose a course in art history. The professor is a humorous old man. He particularly enjoys telling myths and legends. Coincidentally, I am quite interested in those as well. One day, when he was talking about the story of the fallen goddess, I suddenly felt a tight pain in my chest. A classmate next to me asked if I was feeling unwell. I shook my head. Smiling, I pointed out the window and said, "Maybe it's just the stuffy weather. The autumn outside is particularly beautiful. The maple leaves are as red as if they were dripping blood," but none of us noticed. There is a man standing under the sycamore tree outside the teaching building. His gaze is very deep, but his eyes are gray. It was the year I graduated. Springfield experienced a snowstorm not seen in 10 years. I'm standing by the window of my newly rented apartment, watching the snowflakes fall one by one. My roommate handed me a cup of hot cocoa. We casually talked about today's trending topics. I heard a wealthy person passed away this morning. He was only in his 30s. It's really tragic. I glanced at the television. The screen was broadcasting an obituary. The man in the photo looked extremely thin. His eyes were wrapped in bandages. I don't know why. My heart suddenly tightened. "Are you okay?" My roommate noticed my strange expression. He asked with concern, "Do you know him?" Why such a big reaction? I calmed down a bit, then shook my head and said, "I'm fine. I don't know him." My roommate frowned and said, "I'm fine. Your eyes are all red." I reached out and touched the corner of my eye. For some reason, it was surprisingly a bit damp there. That night, I had a very long dream. In the dream, there was a person kneeling on the top of a snowy mountain, digging through the thick snow with his hands. Blood stained the white snow red. He kept shouting, but his voice was drowned out by the wind and snow. I could never see his face clearly. When I woke up, I found that my pillowcase was already wet with tears. I tried hard to recall, but I just couldn't remember the details of the dream. 3 years later, in spring, I, as the chief curator, was preparing for an aurora photography exhibition. Since that incident in college, I feel like my life has become particularly smooth. Whatever I want, I can get. Whether it's studying or finding a job, I always meet people who are willing to help me at school, important events, and various scholarship subsidies. Basically, I have a share in all of them. After graduation, I went directly to the best planning company in the country. I was promoted to a supervisor position in just 3 years. Sometimes, I feel as if there are hands pushing me forward from behind. In the center of the exhibition hall hangs the famous photographer Isabella's final work, Snow Peak Aurora. People around are full of praise. They say the photo is breathtakingly beautiful. I stood in front of the painting, lost in thought for a while. In the strange green light, it seems like a figure is falling. Someone asked me, "Sophia, does this photo have any special meaning?" The reporter held the microphone in front of me. I smiled politely. My tone was a bit distant. "This painting is very famous. Everyone says it depicts a breathtaking landscape, but I think it feels more like a farewell." The reporter nodded. "It seems like he's thinking about something." I smiled faintly. I turned around. "Point the camera at that painting." Just as I turned around, the leaves of the phoenix tree outside rustled. It felt like someone was softly calling me, "Immortal Lord." Nathaniel's funeral was very simple. There was no fanfare. When the lawyer read the will, everyone was stunned. He donated all his money to the Snow Mountain Rescue Foundation. The ashes were scattered at the place where Alina had the accident. Nathaniel has been gone for 7 years. By the 3 Lives stone in front of the Moon Elder Temple, a white-haired man was kneeling. His spiritual form appeared very weak. The light on his body flickered. The Moon Elder walked up to him and sighed softly. "The bet has been fulfilled. She has completed her journey in the mortal realm. You should also let go of your heart and leave in peace." The man trembled slightly from behind. He asked in a low voice, "Do I still have a chance to see her again?" The old man of the moon thought for a moment. He waved his sleeve. A wisp of white light floated out from his sleeve. It landed on the 3 Lives stone. Images immediately appeared on the stone. It was just the first snow on Earth. Sophia stood in the yard holding her daughter, watching the snow. Her daughter suddenly pointed at the sky, excitedly shouted, "Mom, it's snowing." She looked up. A snowflake landed on her eyelashes. It slowly melted into a warm droplet. She blinked. Her mind felt a bit hazy. She always felt like she had forgotten something important. She gazed blankly at the sky. Her eyes were clear, as if she could see through the stone and make eye contact with the man. Her daughter's shout pulled her back to reality. The little hand was pointing at the page of the fairy tale book with the snow child. "Mom, did the snow child come back in the end?" "You're back." Sophia smiled, gently stroked her daughter's head. It turned into spring rain, sprinkling in the hearts of those who miss it. The scene on the 3 Lives stone is frozen on Sophia's smile. The man smiled faintly. He said softly, "That's good." After saying that, his body transformed into countless starlights, drifting far away. That was the punishment she was meant to bear, both in body and spirit. He took it upon himself for her.